That is a highly controversial topic.
It's not quite moral, but it is a theological explanation.
The idea of like apocalyptic literature is not that it's to be interpreted in necessarily a literal sense.
Yeah, I'm impressed by your very thorough research.
I just started thinking about this because, as you might imagine, nobody's ever asked me in church about Judaism.
That's a fascinating philosophical discussion.
I think it's important to talk to them and find out what they believe. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us here at the What They Believe series. Today's episode is brought to you by the internet, because that's how YouTube works. Actually, all of our episodes are brought to you by the internet. Thanks to those who are helping out on Patreon. The links are here and down below in the thingy. This episode, my guest is Rabbi Rappaport of Temple Beth Or in Coral Springs, Florida. Hope you enjoy the interview, and make sure you stick around for the end where I tell you two things you probably didn't know. Hello and welcome to the What They Believe series. Today my guest is Rabbi Rappaport of Temple Beth Or of Coral Springs, Florida. Thank you for joining us, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
My first question would be, were you raised in the Reform tradition?
I was raised from very early on in a Reform synagogue that was new. My parents were among the first 50 families, and I was always very active. I kind of just was drawn to everything about it and the community and the values and the fact that we were concerned at the temple with things that we weren't necessarily concerned with in a school setting. So questions that really especially were of interest to me. You know, what is the meaning of our lives, and what is our purpose, and why are we here? And just, it seemed like the questions were so much deeper than anything I was getting around me in society. So I think that is a lot of what drew me. This is probably now leading to another question, but I'm sure that's a lot of what drew me to being a rabbi.
Were female rabbis always allowed, or is that a more recent development?
In the Reform movement, which started in Germany, they were just starting to open up to women, and I hope I'm getting her name right. I think it was Regina Jonas, I believe, was a woman who was ordained from the Reform Seminary in Germany, and she, not too long after, was put into a concentration camp and murdered. So in the United States, really, things started opening up for women all at the same time. So among the Protestant seminaries, among our Reformed Jewish seminary, and even in other fields, it was really like the early 70s when things were really opening up for women to be taken seriously as professionals in a number of fields where they weren't necessarily invited before.
What has your experience been as a rabbi, knowing that some people would retort a female rabbi?
Yeah, I mean, people say that about any possible job. You know, you could walk into a doctor's office and the doctor could walk in and the person could say, a female doctor. So I don't know. I don't run into those people very often. I don't think anything about being a rabbi who is a woman is really any different from women in many other fields.
In the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, there are references to other gods in Scripture, like Baal or Asherah. In fact, the name Mordecai means servant of Marduk, and not servant of God. How do you interpret these references?
One of the major themes you see in the Torah is there's all these other different cultures that have their own gods, but they are not your gods. Adonai or Elohim, I'm your God. So it's really important that you know who your God is and you stay loyal to Adonai and don't mess around with these other people's gods, which sometimes they do. And, you know, consequences ensue.
Okay, this is a it's weird coming from someone like me, but were those other gods real? Meaning, were the ancient Jews at the time, did they recognize those gods as actual gods, just not their God? Or did they think they were worshiping things that did not exist?
You have to remember the Torah is pre-Judaism. There's nothing about Judaism in Torah. The Torah describes an early Israelite people in formation. And the Torah is very important to us because it is the foundational building block upon which, as the centuries go on, Judaism is built upon. So it's a very important building block. But it's the ancient world. So when you look at stories in the Torah, it's coming from the assumptions of people in the ancient world. So the best that I can tell in Torah is that it was assumed, well, and this is also what makes it complicated, because the Torah, even though it describes most of it describes a story that took place in a specific time period, it is very, very clear from just a surface reading of it. You don't even have to go into all the scholarship that backs this up. It's very clear that these are different oral traditions from different subgroups of the Israelite people that at some point in time were woven together. So, I mean, that there are so many question marks about when each story comes from and each character, and there's a lot of this. You just have to know you're dealing with material that scholars argue vociferously about, and people will never agree on where it all comes from. Okay, I got a little off on an aside, but the Torah, the ancient world, clearly had an idea that each people, or even each geographical area, depending on what story you're looking at, had a god that was the god almost to like a border. And you see this later after the Torah. You see this in one of the books in Nevi'im, in the next section of the Bible. And you see some of the kings saying, okay, well, if you go into their area, you have to worship that god, but not if you're out in this area. So these are just, again, these are not Jewish ideas. They're ideas from the ancient world, and Judaism comes out of building upon them. So did people think the other gods were real? I'm sure it depended on the person you talk to.
In a recent episode, I spoke with an Orthodox rabbi who said that he worships the same as the rabbis of 2,000 years ago. I was skeptical. Do you have any comment on this?
If you're talking about biblically, because sometimes there are people in the Orthodox or the ultra-Orthodox world that feel they are doing things the same as the Bible. That's clearly not true. That's very obviously not true. I mean, you have to do just a quick cursory read of a few chapters. That's clearly not true. I mean, Passover, as we think of it now, is a radical reworking of an ancient festival where people came to the temple and they brought sacrifices and they ate certain foods together. The rabbis made it into this home-based ceremony where instead of bringing sacrifices, you talk and discuss. So, for example, one of them, there's a bunch of important parts of the Seder, but one important part of the Seder is when everyone looks at the Seder plate where you have the symbols, and it says very clearly in the Gada, okay, Rabbi Gamliel says, if you point to and discuss or mention each of these symbols, it is as if you fulfilled your requirement. That is a radical shift, because what it was before that was you had to bring those things to the temple. Well, now they're like, well, all right, we can't do that. So what are we going to replace it with? how about talking and discussing? And by the way, there is some evidence that replacing with talking and discussing is drawn from the Greco-Roman world. That was borrowed because that at the time was where the early rabbis were, and that was one way that in the Greco-Roman world they connected, anyway, that's what they took it from.
I'm curious about the animal sacrifice, the burnt offering or Shoah. Did that stop after the Second Temple period?
70 CE, like everything came to a stop. That was it. That was it for the priesthood, the temple, Jerusalem as, the real population center of the Jewish world. I mean, the Romans came in and did away with, so that was all gone.
From my perspective, it seems wrong to assign a religion to someone at birth based on what their mother is. And the father doesn't even factor into it. By that logic, I would be Catholic, and I assure you, I am not. I suppose my question is, if everyone came from Adam and Eve, why isn't everyone Jewish?
So are you saying Adam and Eve were Jewish?
I guess that would be the first question. Were Adam and Eve Jewish?
No. There was no. They weren't Israelite. They weren't even Israelite. They weren't even pre-Jewish. The first Torah character that is considered to be, or Torah figure who's considered to be, a monotheist and kind of starting this ancient Israelite people who look to Adonai as their God would be Abraham, who of course is way later. But to say the word Jewish is very premature. I mean, he was, according to the Torah account, he was a monotheist, and he began this family heritage of loyalty to Adonai.
So Abraham's mother was not Jewish?
Abraham wasn't Jewish. There's no Jews in the Torah. Watch my video. I have a video on this on my channel.
Can you see how that would be confusing to someone like me or to anyone outside of Judaism? If Judaism's passed through the mother going forward, then you should be able to trace that backwards through the mother as well, but that's not how it works. At some point, someone gave birth to a Jewish person and they themselves were not Jewish.
No, life doesn't work that way. That's not how people are. I mean, everything is much more chaotic, and it isn't like on this one day in history, Judaism began. It's all complicated, and I'm sure it was different in different regions for a long time. I mean, standardization takes a long time. So first of all, the passing through the mother, it's very unclear. The scholars don't know exactly how that came to be. One theory is that it's another thing that was borrowed from the Greco-Roman era that the early rabbis were living in. That had, and I don't know enough about Greco-Roman laws to know exactly, but I have heard that is a theory.
The food rules as to what's kosher and what's not. First, as far as I know, there are no plants that are off limits.
That is correct.
Well, several types of meat are forbidden, and Catholics were brought up, so I wanted to ask about capybaras. If a Jewish person was so inclined, would they be allowed to eat capybara? I mentioned the Catholics simply because capybaras are fish, according to the Vatican, so that you can eat it during Lent.
They're mammals, though, right?
Yes, they are rodents. They're mammals. They're not fish, but according to the Vatican, they are fish, so that you can eat them during Lent.
The mammals that you can eat Jewishly, that are kosher, are ritually fit for eating, are mammals who chew their cud and who have cloven hooves. So that's the rule.
So that would be a no on the capybara.
If they do not chew their cud and they don't have cloven hooves, that's a no.
What about things like crickets or insects in general?
There are some insects that are okay. I have to say, I just can't stomach the idea of eating an insect on purpose. I realize our food often does have insect parts in it. I try not to think about it. So I unintentionally realize I and everybody else eat insect, but no. But the whole thing of kosher is not really like the individual things you can or can't eat. I mean, it's more useful to look at it as a whole, like what's even the deal with keeping kosher, and why would someone do that? And there is absolutely not agreement, traditionally, there is definitely not agreement on this. And whether or not you choose to limit your eating, I guess depends on what you think the primary purpose of it is. Some of the major, maybe you'd say, benefits that come from having some dietary rules. If you have a group of people that has certain rules around what they can and can't eat, what's going to keep the community together better than that? I mean, that's how people come together. They come together to eat. Another is just what you said, that plants are, if you are vegetarian, as you noted, well, this doesn't apply to you. No, it doesn't. Because the reality is, it is not ideal to kill things for food. We see in the very beginning of the Torah, whether or not you look at Torah as something that, is mythology or it doesn't matter. I mean, the stories from the beginning of the Torah have a lesson or a value that we should really be living peacefully with all other things on earth and not eating them. What happened over time is Judaism is very pragmatic, and you even see this in the Torah. It's a very pragmatic system. People want to eat meat. So sort of what goes into kosher is, okay, this is not ideal, but if you're going to kill things to eat them, there's going to be a lot of rules around that. You have to be very, very conscious of the fact that what you are putting into your mouth was once alive and it was killed for you to eat it.
I'm not going to bother going over this entire list, but like for fish, I know that fish, it has to have scales. Is that what the rule is?
Yeah, fins and scales.
So no sharks, no catfish.
Correct.
I know there were bird rules, but I don't have them memorized. What are the bird rules?
For the birds, it's more listing birds. And so, I know birds of prey are a no. Sometimes there's not clear rules. Sometimes it's just, don't eat this bird, eat this bird. I don't ever eat anything that's like an animal that is weird. So I guess I don't pay that much attention. I just eat if I eat meat, which is not ideal, but I have to say I do eat meat and I do eat chicken. I pretty much eat the standard fare.
Okay, just this last one. Bats. Since bats are classified as birds, are bats okay to eat?
It's not kosher.
I imagine there's not much meat on a bat anyway.
Probably not. The wings seem kind of fibrous or something. I don't know. Yeah, no.
So, what are your personal feelings on Christmas?
I don't really have any personal feelings because it's another religion's holiday.
Yes, but for 6 to 10 weeks before Christmas, our entire culture just becomes Christmas land. There's Christmas music in the stores, there are decorations everywhere, the specials still come on television, I assume.
Right.
So, yes, you're not a part of it, but you are surrounded by it.
Yeah. First of all, don't take away my Rudolph. That is the best show ever. You can probably tell what year I was born by that statement. I am a 60s child. Rudolph is the best. Yes. Charlie Brown Christmas special is cute, but nothing's Rudolph. I don't have a hard and fast rule about it. I mean, if you grow up in this country, that's what it is in December. And music, a lot of the music is very pretty. And certainly all the lights and everything and the decorations are very pretty. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the consumerism that a lot of people complain about, you can feel a little bit good that it's like, well, at least that's not my religion. That's being so incredibly overly consumer oriented and, purchase oriented during this season. I guess the only thing is how much people, if the people around me have an understanding that, oh, this is great and we're having a great time, and we also recognize that not everybody is Christian, then I'm okay with it. So people are much better now. If I go into a store, I am much less likely to be asked like, oh, so are you all ready for Christmas? What are you doing for Christmas? Which is, I guess for most people, that's probably fine. It's a little insensitive and it's awkward. Most people are just like, have a great holiday. Hope you have good holidays. I appreciate that greatly because it's like, I'm fine with seeing all the decorations everywhere, as long as you just recognize, yes, most of us are Christian or somehow Christian adjacent, but we also know other people are Americans, other people live in this country, not everybody is celebrating this Christian holiday, and so I want to be respectful of you as well.
I'd like to thank Rabbi Rappaport for speaking with me here today, and I shall do so now. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. It was fun and it was a pleasure.
Here's the thing. In 1918, the Russian Empire collapsed and left its vassal states free to determine their future. Most joined what became the Soviet Union. Finland chose independence, and the Soviet Union gave no resistance. 20 years later, however, Stalin reversed this policy. The winter of 1939 saw the Soviet Union begin an aggressive military campaign to reacquire the former Tsarist state. The Finns did not like this. Popular history says the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Soviet Union, Vyacheslav Molotov, went on Soviet radio stating that the Soviet planes were flying over Finland, dropping food parcels for their starving neighbors. These were, in reality, incendiary cluster bombs. The Finns dubbed these Molotov bread baskets. Though the Finnish army worked to secure the front, citizens themselves also fought the Soviet tanks rolling into the country. By filling a glass bottle with a mix of kerosene, alcohol, tar, and potassium chloride, they could use windproof matches that would ignite the fuel on impact. The Finns dubbed this Molotov cocktails, a drink to go with the food parcels. Here's the thing. The person considered the first talking head on television was Korla Pandit. His biography tells of his origin in New Delhi as the son of a French opera soprano and a Brahmin government official. In 1949, Korla's Adventures in Music was the first all-music program on television. His career took a hit when a young upstart named Liberace hit the scene years later, but he lived a long and happy life with his wife Beryl and 2 children. He died in 1998 at the age of 77. He wasn't a big splashy star, but he made a good life for his family and even counted Bob Hope as one of his friends. Then, 2 years after his death, R.J. Smith of the magazine Los Angeles started digging. John Ronald Redd was born in early 1920s in St. Louis, Missouri. The whole family, including 7 children, showed unmatched musical talent. Still, John was regarded as the best. But this is important. The family was black, and they were living in Jim Crow-era Missouri. In 1948, together with his future wife Beryl, John created the persona Korla Pandit. You know the rest, because I just told you a couple paragraphs ago. I can imagine a complicated truth. When Red came to Los Angeles, the Musicians Union would not allow black people to join, but they would allow Mexicans to join. And that's why he joined as Juan Ronaldo to get work. The Korla Pandit persona would be easier to maintain because Americans at the time knew very little about India. Another factor may have been that his wife, Beryl, was white. They got married in Tijuana due to California's anti-miscegenation rules. If anyone found out, who knows what would have happened to them and their children. He remained close with his Missouri family throughout his life. They accepted his Korla Pandit persona and even attended some of his concerts. Was it right to do this? In 2014, two producers who knew him years later created a documentary, Korla, about this question. I can recommend watching that rather than asking for my opinion. People are messy, flawed, and complicated. There's no easy answer whether or not he should be praised or condemned. There is a more interesting question. If our country hadn't systematically barred black people from the same opportunity as other races, would he still have done it? As a final note, are you wondering why interracial marriage laws would not apply to somebody of Indian descent? Well, click here. I've got another thing about that. Thanks for watching, and may the road rise with you.
I don't know, Jews supposedly control the weather, Jews supposedly have space lasers. I mean, there's all kinds of things we do.
If Jews controlled the weather, it would never be cold.
That's very true. That's true for me, anyway.